Hello, my name is Dr. Jacqueline. I'm with DTP Leadership Group. This is Hot Topic Gold Talk. I'm going to talk to you in podcast 108 about Trump's false mandate and learning the lessons to protect our democracy. Now, I think a lot of people have questioned, does Trump really have a mandate? The evidence says otherwise. I'm taking time to really research all the resources I can to help bring to you the best articles that I can think of to describe what's going on. And I know many of you don't want to read all the things that I read weekly. And so I'm doing my best to provide what I see are the answers to some of these questions from excellent resources. Trump keeps saying that he has a mandate. He thinks he won the popular vote, and yet he did not. He did win the Electoral College. We don't have all the votes in. There's still about 5% in the states of the counting, and we have to understand is we still have the Electoral College to follow through and have the final votes in the count of the final votes. Now, the Conversations is a valuable resource that I enjoy reading, and its comments on the question about whether he has a mandate or not are excellent. And I want to give them to you and tell you what the Conversations said. Before the election night 2024 was even over, Donald Trump claimed that voters had handed him an unprecedented and powerful mandate. Maybe they didn't. While it initially looked like Trump would get a majority of the popular vote, his margin has since shrunk, with Trump, as of November 21st, securing 49.87% of the popular vote, a plurality, not a majority, and Kamala Harris getting 48.25%. Now, scholars say that they have studied and looked at what presidents do and the reasons that they decide to declare these kinds of mandates. So I think one of the best things I see about the Conversations is they bring in scholars who can truly tell us things. So one of the people they brought in is a woman who has written a book on presidential mandates and how they serve as tools to consolidate power, and especially in polarized times. So I think Asiri, the author, says, let's look at the claims they've made and let's see what is really there. And this is what she points out to us. The possible objections to the entire idea of an electoral mandate are endless. And in her book, she talks about that and she walks us through as readers in this history of presidents who claimed mandates, all the way from Andrew Jackson to Barack Obama. And she goes even deeper into the research into the historical basis of the claiming of mandates. And she says one of the primary things they do it for is to expand their power. The other thing is, she says, often the mandate is declared so they can have unchecked executive power and have a veneer that the popular vote is supporting them. In other cases, she says the claim of mandate is politicians in very weak positions responding to polarized politics and flagellating legitimacy. She says, let's look at 2000 with George W. Bush. He lost the popular vote. He won the Electoral College, but he told his GOP congressional leaders, I am able to stand here before you as the president because of my agenda that I ran on. That's another way of saying I had the mandate. So I think the truth is that the popular vote myth and Trump's plurality, not a majority, give us a very clear message. So he doesn't have a mandate. Now, I've given you the facts about the popular vote, and they're still being counted. And it's a very slim margin that Republicans gained. And it shows the fragility of Trump's claim to a mandate. Now, I think there's another article, which you have in my reference list, that's titled, Does Trump Actually Have a Mandate? Not really, they started out with. Does he have a mandate to put various governmental agencies on the chopping block? The Washington Post senior political reporter, Alan Blakes, has explored just how much Republicans won in this last election. The final results are these. We learned a while back that Republicans lost most of the swing state senator races, 4 out of 5. They flipped the chamber because they won in 3 red states that Trump carried by double digits. Trump didn't even win a majority of the popular vote, and his popular vote continues to decrease. There's a 1.7 points difference between them, and there's a continual counting of votes, and he continues to lose in the count. Yes, he won by the Electoral College, but the majority of voters do not support him. Now, another thing I want us to be aware of is that there's an outstanding group called On the Line that was developed by Barack Obama in his administration to fight for fair maps and eliminating gerrymandering, because that's what protects our democracy. And the work of this organization is excellent. And I want to say to you, in their newsletter, Biz, All on the Line, I encourage you to get their email will be included in my reference list. All on the Line at redistricting.org. So I'm asking you to look at it because I think it's a great place for you to really give some information and get some information and also support what they're doing. One of the titles of this thing is Moral Arches Don't Bend with Certainty. And the Attorney General Holder, who is the one that heads this organization, says moral arches don't bend with certainty. History is not a Marvel movie. The good guys lose as often as they win. And in this article, they go on to say there's no easy way to say it. A lot of good folks lost races around the country, but some very strong pro-democratic leaders won. And it's because of this particular redistricting organization. The former voting rights advocate and current North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Allison Riggs is in the midst of a recount. And by the time this, I found out that by the time this article was over, Riggs won by just 200 votes. So we have lots of close races that happen. I know that there are many people in our community that work so hard to bring about change. And I think this organization does that, and it systematically does that. That's the reason I give my money to it. We must understand that each of us may feel discouraged. But the more that we find about what is really happening in the election and the counting of the votes and so forth, it enables us to see that the incoming administration may be in control of the federal government, and they do threaten the very foundation of freedom, and they are saying threats to those and that may lose something, and it gets kind of scary. But let me show you what this organization has done, both in Louisiana and Alabama, because of the Allen versus Milligan decision. It enforced protection enshrined in the Voting Rights of 1965, and because of that approval by the Supreme Court, both Louisiana and Alabama had to withdraw their maps. Guess what happened? Both of these states elected 2 Black members of Congress who truly reflect their political desires. In Arizona, we had a problem where this organization educated voters around the high stakes of a ballot initiative that they wanted to defeat. They wanted to defeat the Judicial Accountability Act of 2024 that they were trying to pass in Arizona. If it had been passed, it would have ended the term limits for state Supreme and appellate court judges. And so the people of Arizona would not have the opportunity to decide who they want to serve in those positions. By holding the line, they prevented partisan abuse of power. And so now Arizonians have the right to decide who's going to be in their highest courts. Another thing that this organization has done that Holder has is it helps to build power in states all over the country. It's not just they do all kinds of things. What happened is they ended up being able to get 6,800 people to work in various places. And through that, they were able to protect a number of things and to protect and make certain that there were millions of votes that were counted that will make certain they were counted. I think this organization restores fairness to our democracy. And they did this in a big way in this last election. They have fought long-term for fair maps and eliminate the Republican gerrymandering and so forth. And they will continue to do so. That's the reason that I think they're so important. Next, they mentioned in this newsletter that next year alone, there are state house elections in Virginia and state court seats in Wisconsin, and 3 states have Supreme Court seats up in Pennsylvania. So the National Redistricting Foundation, or the NRF, is supporting voters in a very active way of litigation in Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, and Florida. And so they're trying to do something, and they are succeeding with eliminating gerrymandering in a number of areas. So again, I ask you to get on their email list, all on the line, and you will see that in my references. Now, the 2024 election was marred by unprecedented misinformation. It was orchestrated by the Republican campaign and backed by Elon Musk. The misleading ads targeted specific communities with contradictory messages designed to suppress the Kamala Harris's voters. I want you to hear some of the things that have been said, but I also want to make certain that you know the Washington Post has excellent investigative journalists, and they discovered that to give a clear picture of what a multi-pronged dark money effort by advisors to Elon Musk targeted liberal, Jews, Muslims, and Black voters with ads that were not quite what they seemed. I'm going to give you some of these, and I'll be honest, when I read this article, there's no way to summarize what all is in it. You're going to want to read every sentence to see what all happened. But here are some of the examples I want to give you. Muslims in Michigan began seeing pro-Israel ads this fall, praising Vice President Kamala Harris for marrying a Jewish man and backing the Jewish state. Jews in Pennsylvania, meanwhile, saw ads from the same group with the opposite message. Harris wanted to stop U.S. arms shipment to Israel. These are the kinds of messages that Elon Musk and the Republicans developed. Another group promoted Kamala's bold progressive agenda, and they said that conservative-leaning Donald Trump voters were being given certain messages. Well, a third filled the phones of young liberals with videos about how Harris had abandoned the progressive dream. Black voters in North Carolina were told Democrats wanted to take away their menthol cigarettes, while working class white men in the Midwest were warned that Harris would support quotas for minorities and deny them certain nicotine products. What voters had no way to know at the time was that all these ads were part of a single 45 million effort created by political advisors to Tesla's founder, Elon Musk, who had previously worked on the presidential campaign of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. What I think is very disturbing about this is we have many people in America through this misinformation that got the wrong message, and their purpose was to suppress the voters coming out for Harris. The thing we need to do is to bring out these kind of things and let everybody know, because we have to fully understand that Musk and the Republican Party's efforts to promote misinformation was how they won this election. Now, they worked in concert with separate projects by the Trump campaign to depress turnout for Harris, knowing that Trump would be unlikely to drastically expand the vote totals that he had. I've already given you the data just a few minutes ago of what has happened with the vote. I also have given you information about how Democrats stayed home and didn't vote, or women stayed home and didn't vote. And I'm saying if all those individuals had come out, Kamala Harris would have won, because Trump's totals increased slightly from 2020, but not enough. The problem is Kamala Harris's campaign was affected by this. And what is very sad to me is Building America's Future groups took footage from a Harris ad in Pennsylvania targeting Jews and began targeting it to Muslims with the words, "This is a real Kamala Harris." They imposed her on these ads. Now, people in both sides of the camp of the aisle knew that it was dishonest. They knew it was happening. They knew it was disingenuous. And yet they did nothing about it. The Republican Party said and admitted to it, but it worked, and the numbers are undeniable, Romero said. We had a total of inquiries on these efforts from the media. We didn't answer any of them. We just ran our strategy and we didn't care what anyone said. Romero is the spokesperson and the creator of this strategy for building America's future, and also worked as a spokesperson for Musk's America Pact. And here's some other things that we as Democrats need to face. When we look at the historical analysis of the Democratic Party, there are some things that we did that are not helpful. In an article in the Washington Post entitled "The Democrats Weren't Stupid or Crazy, Just Wrong," when we get to the place where partisans can misinterpret their victories, then we have a serious problem. And this article goes back to Barack Obama's landslide election in 2008, and then the sharper turn to the left that took place with the Democratic Party because of the impact of partisan sorting. As liberal Republicans became Democrats and conservative Democrats became Republicans, there were fewer votes and politicians inside the tent to restrain liberal impulses. The pro-life, the pro-gun Democrats we had previously, as a part of the Democratic congressional majorities, dwindled and then all but disappeared. So we saw a way of not maintaining because we went so far to the left. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't be progressive and that we can have a progressive campaign. I'm not saying that at all. But here's something that I think is important in this article, because it stands out, one of the things that was said. Biden's era Democrats did not ignore the working class voters. They just thought that any culture-based disagreements with those voters, especially white moderates and conservatives, could be fixed by economic appeals, infrastructure spending, industrial policies, protectionism, reinvigoration of the anti-trust enforcement, and pro-union policies were supposed to prove that the Democrats were on the side of working Americans with no need to modify their socially liberal positions. There's a big difference between policy and then the issues that are occurring in the social liberal positions we've taken. Now, on election day, the bill came in for us. Have the overconfident assumptions we made and the mistaken interpretations. We stopped paying attention to a very low presidential ratings, and we found out they do matter. The rallying cry of abortion and democracy was not able to overcome the economic discontent that has been fed by the misinformation. The ads assailing the Democrats' combination of extremism and condescension on issues with immigration and transgender rights hit home, and people shifted. So what I want to say is, in another article in the New York Times, they talk about Kamala Harris failed to read the room. Democrats, they say, need to take time and make the effort to hear what the American people have told us about the losses of trust in our government. The Democratic Party became addicted, I think, to certain positions, ignoring what the American people were saying to us about their concerns, about our positions. I know one thing. I have worked in the field of addiction for a long time. And the only way that you can change an addictive process, like I've seen here with the Democratic Party, and it's written on many articles, is we have to admit our mistakes and face the problems that we have created. Now, one of my favorite writers is Peter Weiner with the Atlantic. And he came up with an article that I think we all need to listen to because it gives us some very good suggestions as a Democrat. Don't give up on the truth. Inspire path forward, truth telling. Now, I'm going to go into more detail with what Peter Warner says when he says we can't give up the truth. We have to inspire a forward pathway of truth telling. That's what I'm trying to do in these podcasts, is do the best I can with all the research I do to give you what I see as the truth and what we've done. He said we have to have moral courage and we have to cultivate hope through this analysis process. He said we have to draw on the lessons of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy and others who had the courage to stand up and speak out about things in our world that were not working. He said the Democratic Party, in order to move forward, must make impact with voters by being clear what we need to do so that we can have different results in 2026 and 2028. But I think we need to face the facts, and that's what's in this article. Trump isn't only winning politically, he is winning culturally and shaping Americans' manners and mores. We need to face the fact that his supporters will excuse away anything he does in the future, since they have excused away anything he's done in his past. And for the Democrats, Warner goes and he starts naming specifically what he thinks needs to happen. First, we must remind ourselves of the importance of truth telling, of bearing moral witness, of calling out lies. Countless people, famous and unknown, have told the truth in circumstances that are far more arduous and dangerous than ours. The simple step a courageous individual must take is to decline to take part in the lies. Now, I think there's one thing that I always remember. One word of truth always outweighs a lie. So we cannot sit by anymore like many people that knew about the misinformation and did nothing about it. Second, he says, we need to guard our soul. The challenge for Trump's critics is to call Trump out when he acts cruelly and unjustly without being embittered, cynical, or fatalistic about what's happening. I think if we speak in anger, we're not going to get anywhere. We're going to have to speak from truth, from a managed situation where we manage our emotions and speak from truth. Another thing I want to say is we cannot invest our time with the realization that we have elected, and this is coming from this same article, a man of borderless corruption and sociopathic tendencies. I didn't write that. This has been written many, many times. I have mentioned it in some of my articles. But what we have to do now is to start talking about how we can move forward. So one of the things I'm going to do is there will be a podcast that details how Trump won this election. I don't like the misinformation, but there are things that they did besides the misinformation that led them to where they are. His campaign did do some of the work. And what I know is, in talking with friends that I have that voted for him, I've got to be willing to rise above the past and let go of the need to fight and condemn and try to see what can be looked at with Trump. In this article, one of the things that Warner included was the brilliance of Martin Luther King and his moments of things that he did with his movement of passion and civil dissent. Civil dissent. That's what we need to be doing. So Warner says the third thing I'm going to say to the Democratic Party, which is for a time is only the alternative to Trump's led authoritarian leaning GOPs. We need to learn from these losses, he says. My view aligns with that of my Atlantic colleague, Rush, who told me that this election mainly reaffirmed voters about anti-incumbent sentiment, not only in the US, but also abroad. We know that incumbents lost in Japan as well as in Germany. In 2020, Biden and the Democrats were the vehicle to push the incumbent party out. In 2016, and again in 2024, Trump and the Republicans were the vehicle to push the incumbent out. So we're going to have to look at the incumbent issues and what relates to all that so we can determine how to win in the next elections. I personally know people that want a simple answer to move on from their pain. I think they're going to miss some of the greatest learnings they will ever have because they don't want to take the time that I'm doing, or hopefully you're doing as a listener of my podcast, to learn more and more and more so we fully understand what happened here. Warner says the fourth thing you need to realize is Trump's critics need to keep the moment in context. And there's a great historian that said, Trump is a unique threat to our constitutional government. I anticipate that Trump's victories will inflict harm on our country, and some of it may be irreparable. But it's also possible that the concerns I've had about Trump, which were realized in his first term, don't come to pass in the second term. And if they do, America will emerge significantly weakened but not broken. Low moments need not be permanent moments. Let me repeat that again. Low moments need not be permanent moments. There are other things I know. And I think you all know that families and organizations have been divided for years because of Trump and the politics that he brought into their country. So Weiner says in his fifth point, all of us need to cultivate hope, rightly understood. The great Czech playwright and later president of the Czech Republic, Václav Havel, in Disturbing the Peace, wrote that hope is detached from circumstances, but neither is it prisoner to the circumstances. Hope isn't detached from circumstances. Hope isn't detached from circumstances, but neither is the prisoner to circumstances. I think I'm going to take that and put it in a place where I can read it. The kind of hope he had in mind is experienced above all as a state of mind, not a state of the world. A state of mind, not a state of the world. It is a dimension of soul, he said, an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced and is anchored somewhere beyond its horizon. Now, in this article, they talk a great deal about John F. Kennedy and when he went to South Africa. So I've taken some of the quotes that were given by Warner. And here's what he said about John F. Kennedy in his speech. He spoke about the need to recognize the full human equality of all people before God, before the law, and in the council of government. He acknowledged the wide and tragic gap between great ideals and reality, including in America at his time, with ideals constantly recalling us to our duties. Speaking to young people at the university where he was speaking, he warned about the dangers of futility, the belief that there's nothing one man or one woman can do against the enormous array of the world's ills, against misery, against ignorance or injustice and violence. Kennedy urged people to have the moral courage to enter the conflict, to fight for their ideals. Now, we all know that apartheid ended, and also Mandela became president of South Africa. But here's one of the things that I greatly appreciate that's on the gravestone of Kennedy in Arlington National Cemetery. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth the ripple of hope and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy. And during those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. So when I thought about all this, I came to a realization, and I want to read my last paragraph because I was really kind of amazed at what I came up with, and I'd like to share it with you. Robert F. Kennedy's timeless words remind us that striking out against injustice is always right and always matters. His vision of countless ripples building a powerful current should guide us all now more than ever. As we face this moment in American history, we must commit ourselves to truth, courage, and hope, anchoring our actions not in despair, but in the belief that we can shape a better future. It happened in South Africa during apartheid, and it can happen here. And I'm asking all of you to let us rise to the challenge and ensure that we fight for justice, fairness, and democracy to prevail. Thank you for listening.